So in the previous video, we created the application class, and we also started work on the Parse applications class. So in this video, we're going to continue on working with the Parse applications class and generate the code that is going to start extracting the information we want out of the XML data that has been downloaded. So we need to create a new method. So we're going to create one called process, public Boolean process. And we need a few variables. Firstly, we need to identify whether the process has succeeded or failed. So I'm going to call this one op status, and it's going to be default to true. Actually, we'll just make that status like so. We also want an application record. So I'm going to create one called, and I'm just going to call it application record. Call that current record. We also want another variable called inEntry, and set that to false. And lastly, we're going to have another one, and we'll put text value, and we'll just set it to two empty quotes. Now I'm going to talk about what the inEntry and text value, and actually what all four variables are as we move through the code. So next we want to add a try block, and I'm going to talk about why we're going to do that shortly. So I'm going to just add a try, and we're going to do catch exception E, because we talked about try blocks before in a previous video. But what we actually want to do here is if there's some sort of problem parsing the file, maybe the data didn't get downloaded completely, or there's some error, we just want to actually exit. So we're going to type status equals false, and we're going to do an e.print stack trace. So we're just going to print the error. So we're not going to do any logging or anything else like that. We're just going to do that for the time being. So if there is a problem, we're going to do that. And we're catching, if you use the exception without selecting a specific type of exception, then that catches all types of exceptions. So that's going to be all we need to do there. So next what we need to do is start using some of these XML tools. These they're called parsers, and this is code that's built into Android that does a lot of the heavy lifting for us in terms of extracting data out of XML files. So we're going to type XML pull parser factory, that's that third one there, and that's going to be factory equals XML pull parser factory dot new instance. So we're creating a new instance of this factory method, this factory class, which will enable us to sort of get access to some of these features so that we don't have to write all this code ourselves. And we'll do factory.set namespace true. So you don't really need to know too much about it other than the fact that we're just initializing this code so that we can actually start accessing it in our code. So we've actually set it up, and the next thing we need to do is set up an XML pull parser. And again, don't be too concerned about this for now, because you'll actually see it working in the code shortly, and it'll make more sense as we'll go through it then. So factory.new pull parser. So we're actually grabbing the code now that was going to be used in our code to actually extract the bits out of it. So what we need to do is now with this XML pull parser, we need to actually tell it, well, what do you want to work on? This is what we want you to work on. So we're going to do xpp dot, and we use set input. So what we're doing is we're passing the code that has been sent to us and that we're going to actually work on. And we can put this .xml data. Then also, because it's actually looking for, and you probably saw that when I actually typed the bracket, it's looking for a stream. So it's actually looking for an input stream or a reader. Well, of course, passing this .xml data at the moment, that is just a string. So what we need to do is we need to use a reader called a string reader, which really just converts the string into a format that this XML pull parser can use to extract. So you'll find this a lot with Java applications, the way they've been designed, particularly when you're using the components that are built into Android, that it needs data in a certain format. And invariably, if you do a little bit of checking, you'll see that there's some code that's in Android, which is part of Java, that actually does the heavy lifting for you. So in this case, we can actually use something called a string reader class. So we can type new string reader, and that string reader accepts as a parameter string. And by doing that and wrapping it in brackets, that then makes the parser happy. That actually sets up our data, which remember came from the download from the file that we downloaded, the top 10 list of apps on the App Store. It's now in a format that the parser can actually use to read. So lastly, we need to actually capture the event type. Now the event type is going to be important as we go through, and I'll explain that shortly. But for now, we'll type event type equals xpp.getEventType. We're going to be using that in our code. Because each time we get to a particular part of the XML file, this event type is going to change. So what we want to do is we want to know things like when we're getting to an entry. So just getting back to our code again. What we want to know is every time we get to one of these entries, So we know if we get to a new entry, we know that this is going to be a new application. So we need to initialize our application class, our application object. And likewise for all the other entries, when we get to a specific, for the name, the field name, we know we need to extract that name out. Likewise for the artist and the release date. But then another one we would obviously want as well is when we get to the end of the document to stop processing. So all of these things are actually our event types. And the XML pool parser is actually going to do that for us. So we don't actually have to figure out how that works. We just need to tell it, if this particular event type happens, I want you to do this processing. That's the beauty about using this code. Otherwise, you'd have to write all this code yourself and it would be quite complicated, way more complicated than what I'm going to show you now. So I'm going to make a bit of space because there's a bit of code to add here. So what we want to do is we want to start off by putting a while statement. And what we're going to do is we're going to type while event type is not equal to XML pool parser dot end document. So all that's doing is saying we're going to continue looping through this XML file until we get to the end of the file. So the next thing we need to do is we need to get the tag name. The tag name, getting back to our code again, to our element, the tag name is what you see there. So author would be a tag name, entry would be a tag name, the name itself would be a tag name. So what we want to do now is we want to actually start looking at that to see what that name is, and then we can actually start doing some testing. So to do that, we're going to type string tag name. So we're just going to say whatever the current tag name is, xpp.getName, and it does that for us. So it will figure it out. Next, what we want to do is we want to start, depending on what that tag name is, to do some processing. So we're going to use a switch statement. So I'm going to type switch event type. So the first one we actually want is we want the start of a tag. So again, going back to the code with start tag, it's when we get to the start of a tag, that means it's this entry up here. So we're getting to the start of a new section. We want to do some processing. And contrasting that, when we go right down to the bottom, you can't actually see it on here, but right closing off, the last thing you can see before we go into the new entry, there will be an ending entry. So we can use this start tag and end tag to figure out where we are within the scope of this document and to do the appropriate processing. Getting back to our code, the first one we're going to test for, therefore, is going to be case XML pool parser dot start tag. Start tag, as you can see there. And what we're going to put is we're going to put if that tag name, if that dot equals, I'm going to type dot equals ignore case, so it can be upper or lower case, just in case it happens to be uppercase. We're just going to say, so long as that equals what I've typed here, in this case it's going to be entry, then we're going to type in entry equals true. Then we're going to type current record equals new application. So what are we doing there? Well, what we're doing firstly, we're checking to see whether the tag entry, whether we're at the start. So in other words, have we been scrolling through the file and we've got to the first step here, which is this first entry. So have we reached one of these entries? And if we have, that means we're about to process a new application. So what I've done is I've set up a variable called inEntry. We set that to true, and you'll see why I'm doing that shortly. And then I'm also initializing the current record object again to clear out the old values if we've already processed an entry. So we're creating a new instance of that object. We're creating a new object for that class. And that's literally all we need to do at this stage, because remembering that the way this works is it doesn't actually go through section by section. So looking at the entry again, it doesn't go to that entry, then skip to the next entry. The tag, it'll hit that entry tag. The next thing it'll find is updated, then ID, then title, then summary, and so on and so forth. So what we've done here is, again with the code, is we've just said at this stage, that's all we need to know. We've hit that new start tag, and we've set up a variable to say that we're actually in a new entry, and we've initialized the record. So any other processing is going to happen elsewhere. And what I'm going to do also is, add a break there as well. And that's all we're going to do for that at the moment, but ultimately there will be more code there. I'm going to type case XML pool parser dot end tag. So in the case of an end tag, what we're going to do there is we've actually got a bit of work to do here, because the end tag can apply to not only to the entry, but to each of the fields that we're going to actually work with. So we've actually got the name field that we want to work with. We've also got the artist, and also we've got the release date. So for each of those, we need to do an individual test when we get into the end of that tag so that we can actually save it. So I'm going to go back here and put that in the code. So if the end tag, firstly, we're going to put if. Actually, what I'll do first is, rather than putting all that code, I'm just going to put some logging in here. and I'm just going to show you what's working. So the first step will be showing this in logging output, and then we'll go back and add all the actual code to do the proper processing. So what we'll do is we'll go to the start tag, and I'm going to put log.d. I'm going to call this one Parse Applications. And I'm going to put something like starting tag for tag name. And this will make more sense once you actually see this working. So likewise, we'll do something at the end there. We'll put ending tag. And we'll do a break as well. So why don't we just do that first, and we'll actually see how this works and get this actually working, and then we'll go through and add some more of the code. So what the other thing we'll need to do is, after we've actually done some processing, so what I'll do is just add a default there, and I'll put nothing else to do. But what we also need to do here is we need to put xpp.next, and actually what we put is event type equals xpp.next. So we're setting the variable event type to whatever the next tag or processing line is from the parser. So in other words, the parser is going to continually go through until it gets to the end of the document. And remember that the while is going to keep us in that loop until it reaches the end of the document. So once it hits the end of the document, it's going to automatically exit out of here and we'll be good to go. So then what we can do is, just to make sure that this is working, we'll just put a return true. Like so. So that's the basic parser that's working now. So all we're going to do at the moment is we're going to go right through reading it element by element within that XML file. We're looking for a start tag. If we can find that start tag, we're going to display a message showing us what the name is. And likewise for an end tag, we're going to do the same thing, but showing the ending tag message. And that's all we're going to do. Just to really confirm how this works. So in order to get that to work, what we need to do is we'll need to go back to our main activity class, and we need to actually kick off and actually do some processing. So what we need to do is add an instance. This is when the button is clicked on the screen. So we're going to type Parse Applications. Parse Applications equals new Parse Applications, like so. Now, what we need to do is be able to access the data that has been retrieved, because ultimately we need to pass that to this method here. So it's actually expecting some data. Now, if you recall, we actually, scrolling down, we used mfile contents. And that variable there has actually got the contents that we're actually after. So what we could do is put that in there like so, paste that in there, but we get an error. And the reason that we get an error is we're trying to access that variable, that field that we've defined in the download data class, which is a private field from another class. And it's not going to let us do it. So there are workarounds to do that, but it's actually clearer. In this case, what we can do is we can actually just remove this. So I'm going to copy the entire line there. I'll cut that out. I'm going to go back up to the top, and I'm actually just going to paste it in as one of the first lines of text here. And by doing that, firstly, that fixes this error here now, because it can now access that field, which is great. But it also doesn't break any of the code in the download data class as well, because it's also able to access that field from the main class, because that's an inner class. So by doing that, we've now passed the actual data that we want to process to this parser. So the final thing we need to do is we need to start that process. So to start the process, we're going to just type parse applications.process. And of course, that .process is going to invoke this process method that we've just created. So why don't we actually give that a bit of a run and see what happens and see whether it actually works. And then we'll look at expanding the process functionality. So I'm going to run that. And obviously what I've done there is I put that in the wrong place, return true. I'm going to cut it out of there. Should have actually been placed there. That's the last line before the method closed. So I'll do that and actually go back and we'll try running it again. Should have a bit more success this time. So our application is still going to download the data. We've still got that code in there. So that should still work as per normal. So what we might do is just wait and see if it does. And you can see the data has been downloaded and that's being dumped out to the console. But now if we actually go back to our app, we've also got this Parse XML file. So if we actually click that, we haven't got anything on the screen because we haven't updated the screen yet. But if we go back to our code again, we should hopefully have some entries on the screen confirming that it's actually processed. And the reason that it's not showing at the moment is I've actually only got download data there. So I'll change that to Parse application, because if you recall, Parse application was what we assigned to our logs there, Parse application. So that's why we didn't see it until I did that. Now I want you to look at these messages because this will really help solidify what we're trying to do here. You notice what's happening. This is step by step what this parser is actually doing as it's going through the file. So you can see it's got starting tag for feed, ending tag for feed, starting tag for ID, ending tag for ID. So it's going through each one of those sections. And you'll notice as we keep scrolling down, eventually we'll get an entry. I think I missed an entry there, did I? There's one there, starting tag for entry, and then starting tag for updated, ending tag for updated, ending tag for, I'm not sure why that's displaying that twice. Maybe there's two elements within there. I'm not too sure, but the bottom line there is anyway, what I'm pointing out, I'm showing you how it's actually going through each field, a field at a time within that XML file and going through the start and the end. So hopefully if you look at that output and you confirm what's happening in here, you can see that literally it's going to go to the feed, then to the ID, then to the title, then to the updated. So that's what this process of this XML parser is doing. It's slowly going through the entire file. And what we've done, again, looking at the code, we've told it just to dump out when it gets to certain components, certain parts of that. So when it gets to the starting tag for a name and ending tag for a name, and you can see by looking at the code how that all works now. So this is the way that the parser works. It does all the hard work of actually opening that file and going through the data. All we have to do is just tell it what to do when it gets to specific cases. Now, just before we end this video, I actually didn't find this at the time of recording the original video, but there is actually a bug in this code. So it doesn't affect the overall application. It still does work, but it does actually show why we're getting that weird problem with multiple tags showing. So I'll just run that again to show you what I was talking about. Actually, I can just show the log again. So you can see the situation where we've got starting tag, it's got ending tag, and it's got ending tag for writes twice. Well, what actually happened was when we created the code, or when I typed it in, I actually put the break in the wrong spot. So I put the break here, which meant that the break is only going to be processed within the if loop. So if the tag name is equal to entry, then and only then will it actually break out of this loop. Otherwise, the code is going to just fall down to this execution for end tag, which is not what we want. So this break actually should have been in below the braces like that. And do check that with all your code. That's a nasty little bug. It just meant that with a switch statement, if you've got a break in the wrong spot, the code falls through to the next section. So in this case, again, what was happening, if the tag name wasn't equal to entry, then the code would fall down into this end tag, which is certainly not what we want. As it worked out, it wasn't actually a tremendous bug in the sense that it causing any problems with our code, but that was more or less just luck. So by putting the break there, that should fix it. So if we run it again, we should find we only get that single instance of end tag showing. So I'm just going to run that, and let's check our log. We'll need to actually tab over when this starts, so when the data's been downloaded. Click on the Parse XML file button, like so. And now if we go back to our code, we can see now it's actually doing the right thing. So I'll scroll up and I'll just get to the stage where it's finding the first tag. Starting tag, and it's got an end tag. So there's no duplication of ending tags anymore, which is exactly what we want. So it's actually working the way it should be. And in case you're wondering why we're seeing two starting tags there, that is completely normal, because if we go and open an entry, it opens the tag for that, then all the actual tags within entry are then processed in order. So you can see in the case of updated, it started and ended, and the tag for entry has started, but again, these are all within that tag, which is why they're coming up independently. So that's actually that fix. So the actual fix for the code, I'll make sure the code is showing in the rest of the download source code, but just make sure you put that break in there, because in subsequent videos you might still see the break showing in this section here. So make sure you actually have changed that in your code to make sure that you don't get those weird little errors. Okay, so it's time now to move on to the next video. We're going to actually enhance this Parse application a little bit more to actually get it working properly. So I'll see you in that next video.